Hello and welcome to UK House in UAE. This event is where the UK and advertising companies based across the UAE come together to meet and share ideas. My name is Aisling Conlon. I'm the International Trade Director for UK Advertising at the Advertising Association, and I'm going to be your host for today. UK House in UAE is brought to you by the UK Lions Reps, Advertising Association, in partnership with the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity, Dubai Links, and the UK government's Great Campaign. Over the next 90 minutes, we have a fantastic lineup of high-quality presentations by leaders and innovators from across the UAE's advertising industry. They're going to be sharing their insights, and there's going to be showcasing opportunities for collaborations going forward. We're going to head straight into the first session, which is called Meeting of Minds, which is a session which will share unique insights into the UAE market. And I'm going to welcome in our moderator for this session, Laura Swinton, Editor-in-Chief and Managing Director at the fantastic online publication, Little Black Book. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. What an introduction.
I'm going to hand over to you and you're going to lead on proceedings for the Meeting of the Mind session, if that's okay with you.
Perfect. And we've got a great panel. We've got Louise Roberts, Managing Director of MullenLowe Open UAE, and Josh Busteed from the Arabian Radio Network, who's the Chief Commercial Officer there. So thank you both for joining me.
Thank you. Good morning.
So we've got a lot to pack in. We want to talk a little bit about, the realities and practicalities of working in and working with the UAE. So I thought to set the scene, I'd ask you both about your own experiences. What first drew you to the UAE? And what were your first impressions when you got there? We'll kick off with you, Josh.
Well, I was actually headhunted, and to be super honest with you, I accepted. They call it a look-see, where they fly you over and to have a look around and sell you the dream. And to be really honest with you, I didn't exactly know where Dubai was. To be super honest. So, but that was 12 years ago. So I remember thinking at that time when I came here, not being able to quite grasp how young the country was at that point and how developed it was. And, that's changed again enormously over the last 12 years that I've been here.
And what's your experience been, Louise?
Well, I arrived 6 years, so not as long as Joshua, but still like a lifetime for many of UAE expats over here. And much like Joshua, it was a job that I moved here for. So I wasn't looking to live or work in the Middle East, but an opportunity came up at MullenLowe, and it was a bit too good to turn down. And I think, like many people that come out here, I sort of came out here thinking a couple of years, and then I'll sort of return home. But it's quite easy to sort of settle in and call this place home. So it's been 6 years, and I can see myself here for another good few years as well.
And Josh, I mean, you hinted already the country's, in its current state, pretty young, and it seems to change daily. So how have the media and advertising industries changed, like in the time that you've been there?
Yeah, look, I think, it's changed dramatically. I think, to be fair and, without wanting to be sounding critical, I think they were probably a little behind the UK and Europe in the turn, certainly when I remember when I was arriving here, newspapers was still, probably 50-60% of market share at that time, which wouldn't have been consistent with the rest of the world. But obviously they've ramped pretty hard on digitization over the last, certainly the last 5 or 6 years. There's been a huge investment in digitization. I think the thing about this place is it's very, very good at, if someone comes up with an idea, at being able to press the go button and what might take 3 years or various government legislations and whatever else in other parts of the world, they can literally come up with an idea and go for it. So, this place, you can often be driving somewhere that you haven't been for a little while, and then the whole road infrastructure has changed, and there's now a 8-lane spaghetti junction that's been built in the last 4 months. So, it's a pretty amazing place to live. But I think media-wise, it's it's pretty consistent with the rest of the world in terms of what they did. I think there's probably still an undervaluation of the role that creativity plays and the investment in creativity. But I think that's improving. But that's probably my view.
And Louise, how about you? How have your sort of initial I guess, preconceptions been challenged, and what have you seen change in that time?
Yeah, I mean, I had a more generalized view of a perception of the Middle East, and that probably led to some misconceptions of the UAE specifically when I came out here. I think a lot of people sort of think about sort of human rights issues and, women that are oppressed. And I think the reality is that when I moved out to the UAE, it was a lot more progressive than what I actually thought. And I think it's continuing to develop in those areas as well. And they've got a long way to go. But, Joshua mentioned, that with 50 years, it's such a young nation. But I mean, what they've been able to do in 50 years compared to any other countries is pretty remarkable. And I think, it tries to keep up with the likes of the West, but it has all of the infrastructure and the means to be able to leapfrog with things like, equality and things like that. So I'm keen to see what the next 50 years are like for the UAE. It will certainly be a different place. Like you say, it constantly changes here. If you went to the UAE a couple of years ago, it will be a different place if you came to it today,
Yeah, and I mean, so we're talking about, opportunities for individuals and businesses in the UK. So what sort of opportunities do you think that there are, particularly for those in the advertising and media industries?
Yeah, look, without wanting to scare any employers that are on the chat, I mean, the reality is we have quite a number of UK expats who I've taken from various media networks in the UK, and we're always looking for great talent here. I think at an agency level, I think there's a great need for skilled and experienced practitioners, both on the creative and media side here in the UK. Certainly from a media supplier point of view, there is. Obviously, without wanting to sound like an ad, not paying tax is the greatest thing that you will ever do. After spending 25 years paying ridiculous tax, to not pay tax again was the greatest day of my life. But, I think the reality is that this is a really good place. To be honest, this is probably the safest place that I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
Like, it is. It doesn't end. I haven't locked my car in 12 years. I don't lock my house. It never enters your head about any of some of those challenges of living in a big city somewhere else in the world. So, it's an attractive place for people to come from an employment point of view. From a business point of view, it probably in the past hasn't been as simple as it would have been to set it up, and I think they're very conscious of that. I think there are some differences between Dubai and Abu Dhabi in terms of how that infrastructure works, but certainly from a Dubai perspective, setting up a business here without the need to have a local partner is now fairly swift and pretty cost effective. Probably at a simple level between £5,000 and £10,000 to be able to set up a business here that enables you to procure government contracts and private contracts. So I think they're very conscious and conscious, and I guess trying to entice Europe in. And obviously with the challenges of the pandemic, Brexit, and other issues that have gone on, I think I've certainly noticed a significant increase in European expats here in the last 12 months.
Interesting. And Louise, do you think, say agencies or brands in the region are open to pitches from businesses based out in the UK?
Yeah, definitely. So Etihad Airways, which is one of our biggest clients, the pitch that was 6 years ago, they were originally only looking at big creative shops that were outside of the region. There is a huge demand for expertise and experience outside of this region. And we work with partners across the globe on a regular basis. But I think, just sort of jumping on what Joshua said about, trying to find ways to make it easier for foreign nationals to be able to come and set up shop and work here. I think it's needed. I think the UAE had to put those changes in place, because I think to truly be able to do business out here, you have to operate our working hours and working week. We currently work from Sunday to Thursday. We're 4 hours ahead of the UK. And I think, in my experience, when I have worked with partners that are outside of the UAE, the relationships don't last any huge length of time. And if you are trying to do sustainable business out here and grow business out here, I do think you need to have a presence in the region. I think that's important.
And I mean, you've already sort of mentioned the sort of 50th anniversary. I mean, just this year alone, there's been so much energy around the UAE. There's the anniversary, there's Expo, there was a Mars probe. So it seems that there's so much investment in technology, science, digital technology, culture. What does that feel like on the ground, in terms of the opportunities and just the optimism, I guess?
Yeah, I think sorry, go Louise.
No, go on, Joshua.
I think, I think what it does for a lot of businesses here, this is a great country for, we call it the land of momentum. And, they invest in things that they think are good and things that they think are progressive. And then that starts to build. And, with this launch of Expo, we've just seen, it's back to 2019. It literally took, 6 or 8 weeks for there to be, a consistent spike across all entries. You have hotels across the UAE now doing record yields, per day yields. You can't get a beach side hotel for probably close to £1,000 a night. It is literally back. And that's come on the back of, as you rightly pointed out, the Mars probe. We have the Golden Jubilee on the 2nd of December, which is 50 years of the country. And, there's this ongoing, momentum that they build of positivity. And to be honest, I think, we need to tip our hat to how well they've handled the pandemic through this process. Most people I know have 4 vaccines. They got one very early and had a second bout later in the piece. The office I'm sitting now, I've been back in this office since May 2020, in terms of operating from our business. So it's, I think that they've done a really good job, but they, as Louise rightly mentioned, they need to do a good job, because this entire country, 4% of the population is locals. 96% of the population is expats at various levels. So they need to make it attractive. They need to make it safe. They need to have a commitment to innovation and growth to be able to continue that role.
And in terms of, I guess, people who haven't had much experience working with the UAE or, like the wider Gulf area, I guess people tend to lump it all together. So Louise, you're based in Abu Dhabi. Josh, you're based in Dubai. And I also know within the wider Gulf region, there's some interesting dynamics, shall we say, with, Saudi Arabia trying to sort of step up and become more of a business hub, which has always traditionally been sort of Dubai's thing. So what do foreigners need to understand about those sorts of dynamics, or what might be useful if they're sort of thinking about sort of setting up a business or moving out? Let's start with you, Louise, I guess.
Yeah, I think, look, education is key here. I mean, there's differences just between, the likes of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, quite significant as well. You could get off a plane in Abu Dhabi and feel like a very different country stepping off a plane in Dubai. And that's not even, considering, the perception, like even myself, when I was coming out here, there is this perception that the Middle East is painted with the same brush. And, it's a very different country to that of Saudi. And there's challenges that present themselves in each one of these different places. But, you know, I think education is key, and coming to visit, you know, certainly if it's something that you're looking to maybe move and experience, you know, work out here. I mean, lots of people, I mean, Dubai is an hour and a half up the road, depending on whereabouts you are in Abu Dhabi. Lots of people may work in one city and live in another. I think Abu Dhabi is a bit more expensive to live and work in. But, you know, I guess Dubai, you know, it is definitely a little bit more westernized. Abu Dhabi is a little bit more laid back. So I think they complement each other so well. You know, there is a cultural aspect that exists in Abu Dhabi, and a bit more glitz and glam in Dubai, but they really do complement each other quite well.
And what's your perspective, Josh?
Yeah, I think Louise makes some really good points. I mean, it's a bit like saying is, you know, every European country is the same. You know, that's the reality of golf, and having done work in all the Gulf countries, they are dramatically different, you know, based on, you know, ruling powers and, you know, history and all the rest of it. So, you know, there is no question that Saudi has, you know, made seismic change in the last 12 or 18 months, and driven by Mohammed bin Zayed in terms of his view on the new Saudi. And, you know, that has revolutionized, you know, it's taken 30 years of one way, and then in 12 months just turn the lights on. You know, women drive, women work. You know, that's just seismic change for, obviously, still a long way behind the UAE in where they need to go, but they certainly have the money to be able to make themselves a real strong power. And I think, to be honest, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the UAE. I think it's meant that the UAE has had to do some new things over the last 12 months to ensure that they still are the leading light in terms of expats and businesses setting up here in the Gulf and using Dubai or Abu Dhabi as their base into the wider MENA region. So, yeah, I think they're very conscious, and like all of us in terms of our own businesses, competition is really good and you know, healthy and makes people better.
And I mean, just sort of touching on you know, women in the workplace. I would love to ask about gender equality, because I think that's something that, you know, a lot of businesses and, you know, individuals also in the UK would be interested to know. Obviously, you know, Dubai seems very, very westernized in a lot of ways, but I would just love to know what's the reality for women doing business and working in the UAE, and what positive changes have you seen since you've both been there? I'll start with you, Louise.
Shall I take the lead on this one, Joshua?
Yeah. You can speak half.
Yeah, I mean, look, gender equality is an issue for a lot of different industries, you know, but our industry specifically all over the globe. It is heightened even more, I think, in the UAE, you know, in the Middle East in general. It's definitely an issue. Campaign recently released their sort of top power list of, you know, of creative leaders, a power list, MENA power list, I think it was called. And there was not one woman on that list. I mean, that is a real example of how we've got quite a long way to go. And that doesn't, the talent is here. But I think we just need to try and create the conditions for women to be able to be successful out here, need to share those opportunities and try and create those opportunities for women. But it is a challenge, you know. I have personal experience where, you know, I've walked into a room with someone that is a lot more junior to me, that's a man, and, you know, a lot of the questions and conversation is directed towards them. You know, and it takes some time to be able to build that confidence that actually, you know, I'm the one that leads this agency. But there are definitely challenges, and we've got a way to go. But I think, you know, I think the age and the, you know, the way we don't have all the processes like you would do necessarily in the UK, there are ways that we can, you know, progress this issue a lot quicker and do something about it.
And just to sort of, so I think we've just got a couple of minutes. This is going so fast. But there have been a lot of changes in terms of working in the UAE. I understand it used to be that, your visas were very much tied to your employers, but you're working in the media and advertising is all about this freelance economy. So have there been significant changes on that front? I'll ask you, Josh.
Yeah, I think the pandemic helped grow that push for them to change their infrastructure. So there's been a number of changes to the visas that are operated here. They now offer a golden visa, which is essentially a long-term visa, where you need to be recommended by essentially the government department that oversees your part of the infrastructure, whether that's medical or education or media or whatever the case may be. And they're also pushing very heavily on the freelance visa. And so our number of free zones here, probably 5 or 6, offer a freelance visa setup. And again, categorized by the type of business that you do. And certainly for the creative media production one, you're talking probably £5,000 a year to be able to operate that. So what that's meant is they can be set up, they can have infrastructure, they can get insurance, they can get bank accounts and do all that thing under that visa. And importantly, they can also procure government business as part of that process. So I think that makes it a lot more attractive for individuals to do it. And obviously, in the hybrid world that we're living in terms of people being able to do work from remote places, and there's no reason why people can't be doing work back into Europe out of Dubai at a creative and production level pretty swiftly now.
And we've been sort of bombarded, I think, here in the UK with tourism ads from both Dubai and Abu Dhabi. We've got Zac Efron on one hand, John Cena on the other, sort of tempting tourists over. But I'm just really curious what it's like as a place to live, on the ground. What's the reality of that?
It's pretty special, to be able to finish work and go for a walk along the Corniche, or, of a weekend to be able to switch off and sit by a pool. It changes the whole kind of work-life balance, the way you look at it, I guess. Joshua is from Australia, so it's slightly different to my life. What could it be in the UK? But it's a pretty special place to call home, I think.
Yeah, my life's also a bit different to Louise. I've got 4 teenagers, so my life's less about taking a walk on the Corniche, I can assure you. But, the reality is, they're very conscious to make this an attractive place for people to come. I think, Louise made mention earlier, and I think it was a really good representation that Dubai is probably a bit glitzier and glam, and Abu Dhabi is probably a bit more cultural and arts and history focused than Dubai. But I think, whilst there's the shiny nightclubs and the supercars out the front and nice hotels and whatever else, the reality is, the big chunk of people living in Dubai are families, sending their kids to school, playing sport on the weekend, and, saving up their holidays to head back home and see family. So I think, it is a very safe place to live. I think there's some ways to go on the education here for families. I think the schooling here is incredibly expensive. Even most schools are the same price as your most prestigious boarding schools in the UK. So that's all schools. So, I think there's some work to be done because they're all private institutions. Obviously, a lot of UK schools have now set up branches here in Dubai and Abu Dhabi because it's good business. But, in terms of its attractiveness and affordability, it's a pretty good place to live. And as Louise rightly points out, I was being a bit facetious, but there is some pretty special places to enjoy.
Brilliant. And just to sort of wrap things up then, just for anyone sort of sitting watching this, either thinking of opening up an office for their business or even just sort of checking out the employment opportunities, what words of advice would you have?
I'd say get on a plane, get on an Etihad plane is what I would say.
Good work.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. And I think, yeah.
Well, wicked. I guess we're sort of open for questions if anyone in the audience has any questions. I haven't seen any come in so far. But thank you both so much. It's been such an enjoyable and insightful chat. I spoke to both yesterday, and there's even more we could talk about.
We may do another one, Laura. I think it's so interesting that even I think we could do another one on this with both speakers. What we've suggested is just with time that if anyone's got any questions for the speakers, we've handed out LinkedIn details into the chat, and they can come to you directly, or they can contact me, but just sort of in the spirit of the 90 minutes that we have. But I would like to say thank you, Laura, for moderating that session, and a big thanks to Louise and Joshua for taking part.